Hello, my name is Dante Renee, and welcome to the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more. Like tonight's film, 1987's Pretty Peaches Part 2. This is the actual Pretty Peaches trilogy from Vinegar Syndrome, and we actually have an image from each one of the trilogy here. This is the back of the Blu-ray that gives you an image from each of the trilogy and with some synopsises. But this is the Blu-ray trilogy pack here, and they have it available on DVD also, and a limited edition of the original Pretty Peaches, which I've already reviewed on this YouTube page. So we're looking at part 2 tonight. The first one was from '78. And so we're skipping ahead into the later 80s for 1987 for the sequel, Pretty Peaches Part 2. Now, for each one of these, the girl playing Peaches is a different actress, and in many regards, a different story going on. So let's get into this. Let's get into this film here, and we got some wild stuff here, folks. Let's get into Pretty Peaches 2, 1987, given to us from Vinegar Syndrome, looking cleaner than ever for a film that is obviously not clean. So let's get into it here. I have some notes written down if you see my eyes divert. But what we have here is we have a girl needing to find out about the basics of sex. Now, this is something that you would typically hear about in a teen sex comedy or sexploitation film from the 70s, even the 60s. Teen sex comedy of the 80s, this could be something that you could have heard. We have a girl who needs to find out, a virginal girl or a girl that is just not exposed sexually, needs to kind of a coming of age sexually, so on and so forth. And it's affecting her time with her boyfriend and her relationship with her boyfriend. She inquires from her parents and starts an adventure to her uncle's house. And we have within this movie a manly grandmother, an incestuous family, Chinese masters, humans as furniture, Alice in Wonderland characters and situations so weird they're surreal, cheap hotels and room service, divorce and romance and the connections between them, Vietnam head injuries, a theme running through the film of the old times, outrageous dialogue and situations, and comedic, pornographic antics, predominantly in a hotel. Masks. Yes, even masks. This is a wild, wild film, and so much different than the original. And I gotta say, one of the most unique adult films I've ever seen. Pretty Peaches 2 really goes into a surreal, wild world. Now, when we look at the style for this film, it really feels like an 80s adventure comedy in an acid sex dream. That's the best way for me to describe it. If you could put those things together, an 80s adventure comedy like Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, type of thing. Is that the 80s? Yeah, but, Adventures in Babysitting, let's say, meets Alice in Wonderland, meets an X-rated film. Just some crazy thing like that. We have a twist ending in this movie. We have a lot of play with mirrors in this film. Just interesting shots with mirrors. Sexual symmetry, visually speaking, in this film. Bizarre environments, surreal, carnival, hallucinatory, just weird, dream-ridden. Really the stuff of fantasy and dreams. People say X-rated films are worked off of fantasies, and this is, but it's working also off of dreams as well. Literal, just that dream mindscape there's this very interesting stagnant doorway shot in this movie as well, that I had to mention, where the camera just stays there. Now, this Alex de Renzi directed the original Pretty Peaches. He directed all three of them. He also directed a movie that I reviewed on this YouTube page called Babyface, and he definitely has a unique style. He definitely is somebody I sometimes, he's I sometimes almost call him like the Quentin Tarantino of X-rated films, in some form or fashion, and then also like the John Waters of X-rated films, also. But we have this really stagnant doorway shot in this film. You can see boom mics throughout the film as well. You can see them pretty clear at times throughout the film. We have the fourth wall definitely being broken in this film, and we have some wild, some wild stuff involving hoarders. Yes, involving hoarders. Now, this is a film that is so unique in tone, and what makes it even, more unique in tone is the fact that it's an adult film. It's an X-rated film, and the fact that it is X-rated also adds to the story, because they can do things they couldn't normally do in a regular, just an R-rated, maybe sexploitation or sex comedy type film. Now, in terms of the music of Pretty Peaches Part 2, we have disco 80s new wave combination. Yes, new wave meeting disco 80s. What a combo there. We have 80s jazz in this movie. We have Asian sounding music. We have horror dark music in this film. We have mystery tinges in this film as well. And music will change during a sex scene, one after another. It's almost as if someone's switching radio stations. The music is cool and it's interesting. Dramatic, erotic, late night Cinemax sounds as well. If you remember the Cinemax channel in the 80s, they used to call it Skinemax. They wouldn't show anything like this. This is too hard. But that vibe in the music as well. This movie starts off with this tease, this very interesting tease shot of Peach's butt. As she's on top of her boyfriend. And the way the shot is done almost reminded me at times of Franco, or just Light X, something of a tease in the camera work and in the play of it, especially at the beginning of the movie. Very, very interesting how that's done, because we get very, very hard as the film goes on. Now, interestingly enough, I mentioned a hotel because the film takes place in an insane Alice in Wonderland house. It also takes place in a regular house with some dramatic turmoil, and it also takes place in a hotel. The hotel has some very interesting relationship dynamics, some very kind of interesting comedy and playfulness, and some deepness in the relationships and in the connections between people, or lack thereof, especially in terms of history. In terms of the sexuality of this film, we have dressing and undressing in the film, sexual and non-sexual, dressing and undressing of characters. Definitely we have some taboo sexual situations in here, as I mentioned incest before, anal and vaginal mixing in the same sex scene. That's quite not supposed to happen. Could be not very sanitary. It's happening in here, very close up. We have oral. We also have long flying ejaculation sequences in this film. We have innocence within the sex scenes, as Peaches is very innocent, and kind of moves through Pretty Peaches Part 2 as Alice does in Wonderland. The lead is pale, 80s pretty, young looking, and has a great look. She looks very different, though, than Desiree Cousteau in Pretty Peaches 1. But this girl really has a great look and really typifies the 80s look in many regards. Now, the girl in the center here is not Peaches. This is Peaches, and this is Peaches. But for some reason, they didn't put Peaches represent her on the cover for part 2. That's actually the mom of Peaches here. And the mom is actually in other Peaches films as well. So very, very interesting, and this is a very wild X-rated film, no doubt. I have to tell you that Ron Jeremy plays. I mean, if you ever doubted his acting, if you ever doubted his insanity in his acting, he was so off the wall crazy, and it worked so amazingly for his character and within the storyline of this very surreal movie that. He was genius in this film. I mean, he's a very big name. Everybody knows Ron Jeremy, big penis, blah, 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 blah. He was ingenious in this film. He was unbelievable. He did some things that were just... His dialogue, especially at this dinner table scene. I mean, everybody talks about the dinner table scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's a dinner table scene in Pretty Peaches too that is outrageous in a totally different way. And it's led by Ron Jeremy's characterization and dialogue. I laughed out loud. It was insane. Pretty Peaches 2, 1987. This is a very surreal, comedic, wild, off the hinges, bizarre, dreamlike, hardcore X-rated film that will shock you even in the sexuality of the film and in some of the shots. It takes on a very surreal vibe even in the editing of the film, even in the way the story develops in the film. It's not just in the crazy characters and situations. It's also in the way that the storyline develops. It's not normal, the way the movie is edited or plays out. It's done in a very dreamlike way. Pretty Peaches Part 2, 1987. Thank you so much for watching the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more, like Pretty Peaches 2. Thank you so much, and have a great night.